In the shifting shadows of Tudor England, power was both a prize and a peril. Beauty could open doors, charm could win hearts, but neither could guarantee survival. Within this treacherous world, a young woman, scarcely more than a child, would rise to become Queen of England, only to be destroyed by forces both within and without. Her name was Catherine Howard. She was celebrated for her youth, her innocence, her vitality, the antithesis to a king grown old and weary. Yet behind the courtly pageantry and whispered devotions lay secrets that, once revealed, would condemn her to the executioner's block. This is the story of Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII, the queen who danced too near the fire, and whose flame was cruelly extinguished. And before we dive in, if you wish to uncover more untold stories from history's shadowed halls, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing your reflections in the comments below. Your voice helps us bring the past back to life. Catherine Howard was born around 1523 into the sprawling and ambitious Howard family, one of the most powerful noble houses in England. Yet despite the prestige of her lineage, Catherine's immediate family stood at the fringes of that greatness. Her father, Lord Edmund Howard, was the third son of Thomas Howard, 2nd Duke of Norfolk. Unlike his elder brothers, Edmund inherited neither wealth nor significant influence. He struggled to maintain his standing, often petitioning the crown for minor positions and favors, living more in debt than in comfort. Joyce Culpeper, Catherine's mother, first married a man named Ralph Lee. When he died, she was left a widow with young children. And it was only later that she married Edmund Howard, a man from a once powerful family that was now struggling to stay important at the king's court. Together, they had a large family, but little means to support it. Joyce's health was fragile. Records suggest she may have succumbed to complications arising from childbirth, a common fate for women of her era. Catherine was just a small child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, when she lost her mother. Her father, burdened with debt and political insignificance, could offer her little protection or guidance. Thus, Catherine was dispatched to the household of her step-grandmother, Agnes Tilney, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, a formidable matriarch who maintained a large and bustling establishment at Lambeth. In theory, Catherine's placement there was an opportunity, a chance to be educated in the proper graces expected of a noblewoman, to be groomed for advantageous marriage. In reality, it was an environment of lax supervision and careless indulgence. The Duchess had so many young people to look after that she either couldn't, or didn't bother to, keep a close eye on them all. Education was haphazard. Catherine likely learned to read and write only in a limited capacity, focusing more on music, dancing, and the art of courtly conversation than on scholarly pursuits. By her early adolescence, Catherine's days were filled with music lessons, dancing, and flirtations, all conducted with little scrutiny. It was in this chaotic household that Catherine's first known relationships began, fleeting affairs with her music master, Henry Manox, and later with Francis Derham, a young man of somewhat higher station. Such secret romances, innocent though they may have seemed to a girl so young, would have grave implications in the rigid moral climate of Henry VIII's court, where a queen's virtue was expected to be absolute. In these formative years, Catherine Howard learned to charm, to delight, to live in the moment, but she did not learn to fear the consequences that would, in time, cost her everything. The Tudor court was a glittering stage, dazzling in its beauty, yet deadly in its intrigues. To the ambitious, it offered untold rewards. To the unwary, it promised ruin. Into this treacherous world stepped Catherine Howard. Still in her mid-teens, she arrived at court under the patronage of her powerful uncle Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk, a master strategist, ever eager to extend his family's influence. The Duke, always mindful of the shifting winds of royal favour, sought to place a Howard woman once again beside the king. Already Anne Boleyn, his niece, had once risen to the throne. Now, with Henry VIII's marriage to Anne of Cleves proving a political embarrassment, another opportunity presented itself. By the year 1540, King Henry VIII was no longer the vigorous, commanding figure of his youth. Years of illness, disappointment, and a political upheaval had left him irritable, suspicious, and desperate for affection. His fourth marriage, to Anne of Cleves, had been arranged for diplomatic reasons, yet from the moment they met, Henry found her physically repellent. He famously referred to Anne as a Flanders mare, and quickly sought a way to end the union. In the midst of his dissatisfaction, the young, vibrant Catherine Howard caught his eye. Catherine, with her musical laughter, her lively manners, and her youthful beauty, was a stark contrast to the political burdens that weighed upon the king's shoulders. She embodied a vision of renewal, of innocence, a vision that Henry in his aging heart desperately wished to believe in. Whispers began to spread throughout the palace corridors. The Duke of Norfolk and his faction encouraged the king's interest, seeing in Catherine a chance to restore the Howard family's waning power at court. By July of 1540, Henry VIII's fourth marriage had collapsed entirely. On the 9th of July, 1540, his union with Anne of Cleves was officially annulled, declared invalid on the grounds of non-consummation and mutual consent. 19 days later, on the 28th of July, 1540, Henry married Catherine Howard in a private ceremony at Oatlands Palace in Surrey. Though the marriage was conducted without public fanfare, the implications were unmistakable. Catherine Howard had become Queen of England. At barely 17 years of age, Catherine had achieved what many women of noble blood could only dream of. She was queen, adorned in jewels, waited on by ladies-in-waiting, revered by the court. Henry VIII was 49 years old at the time, yet beneath the surface, danger brewed. The court, outwardly a place of festivity and ceremony, was in truth a nest of wolves. Every step, every word, every glance was observed, judged, and remembered. Old rivalries seethed beneath the surface, and any hint of scandal could be used as a weapon. Worse still, Catherine carried secrets, secrets from her past life at Lambeth, secrets the Howards had sought to bury. Those who had once known her intimately, like Francis Derham and Henry Manox, lingered in the shadows of her success, potential threats to her fragile new world. For the moment, however, the king saw only the surface, a radiant, adoring wife who seemed to offer him the happiness that had eluded him for so long. Yet in the Tudor court, happiness was a dangerous illusion. Already the forces that would undo Catherine Howard had begun to stir. With Catherine Howard now crowned queen, a fresh sense of vitality seemed to sweep through the aging court of Henry VIII. Where Anne of Cleves had been a diplomatic match, Catherine was a vision of English beauty, youth, and charm, a living emblem of renewal for a king burdened by years of disappointment and decline. Henry was entranced. To him, Catherine was not merely a consort, she was a symbol of hope, a final chance at personal happiness, and perhaps the prospect of another heir. In her presence, the king seemed briefly restored. He smiled more freely, held grand entertainments, and showered his young bride with gifts. The court, ever sensitive to the moods of its sovereign, swiftly adapted to the new reality. Catherine was styled as the very jewel of womanhood, celebrated for her vivacity and sweetness. Even foreign ambassadors remarked upon the king's infatuation with his young queen, noting a visible softening in his notoriously irascible temper. Henry himself called her the rose without a thorn, a rare compliment from a monarch who had by then developed a profound mistrust of women and advisers alike. For a time, Catherine's reign was marked by celebration. Tournaments, masques, and hunting parties filled the royal calendar. Catherine, with her light touch and natural graciousness, excelled at playing the role expected of her, the sweet, dutiful, affectionate queen. Unlike Anne Boleyn, Catherine displayed no open interest in political matters. She neither pressed the king for reforms nor championed ambitious courtiers. Her strength lay in her charm, not her statecraft. It was a role Henry found comforting, and for a moment it seemed Catherine Howard might succeed where others had failed. Yet beneath the gilded surface, small cracks had already begun to form. Henry's physical ailments, most notably his ulcerated leg, continued to worsen, and with them came moments of deep paranoia and melancholy. The king, though enraptured by Catherine, remained a man shaped by betrayals and bloodshed, and Catherine herself carried dangerous secrets. Her youthful indiscretions at Lambeth, with men such as Henry Manox and Francis Dereham, had never truly disappeared. While the Duchess of Norfolk's household had turned a blind eye, others had not forgotten. Francis Dereham, once her lover and perhaps her promised husband, now sought a place in the Queen's household. Such ambition was reckless, for in a world where a queen's virtue was the foundation of her legitimacy, any stain upon her past could prove fatal. Even more perilous was the atmosphere within the court itself. Old rivalries simmered, jealousies festered. To some, Catherine's rise represented an opportunity to align themselves with royal favour. To others, it was an outrage, a chance to destroy yet another Howard queen, as they had once destroyed Anne Boleyn. Among the dangers lurking in the shadows was Thomas Culpeper, a favoured gentleman of the king's privy chamber. Handsome, ambitious, and close to the queen, Culpeper would soon entangle Catherine in a series of private meetings that would later be construed as treasonous. For now, however, Catherine basked in the warmth of royal favour, believing herself secure. The court, the king, the kingdom itself, all seemed to bow before the young queen's charms. But the tide, as ever in Henry's England, was destined to turn. In the Tudor court, secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. For Catherine Howard, the golden days of laughter, music, and royal favour were drawing to a close, eclipsed by the gathering storm of suspicion, betrayal, and revenge. In the autumn of 1541, as Henry and Catherine embarked on a grand progress through the north of England, a ceremonial journey to reinforce royal authority, enemies of the Howard family began to stir. It was during this progress that rumours, long buried, began to surface. John Lascelles, a minor court official, reported that his sister, Mary Hall, once a member of the Dowager Duchess's household, knew compromising details about the Queen's earlier life at Lambeth. Alarmed by the information, Lascelles brought it to the attention of Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, Henry's loyal servant, and a man keenly aware of how swiftly accusations could destroy even the highest in the land. On All Saints' Day, November 1st, 1541, Cranmer placed a letter into the king's hands during Mass at Hampton Court, a letter that would shatter Catherine's world forever. The letter accused the Queen of having engaged in immoral conduct prior to her marriage. To Henry, who prized her for her perceived innocence and purity, it was an intolerable revelation. The king, devastated and disbelieving, withdrew to his private apartments, weeping openly, a rare display of emotion from a monarch long hardened by betrayal. Almost immediately, an investigation was ordered. Catherine was placed under house arrest within Hampton Court, isolated from her household and stripped of her royal dignity. Panicked and unprepared, Catherine at first denied all wrongdoing. But as her former associates were arrested and interrogated, some under torture, the full extent of her past came to light. Francis Dereham, dragged back into the Queen's orbit, admitted that he and Catherine had once been intimately involved. He claimed they had spoken of marriage, a claim that, under Tudor law, could have invalidated Catherine's union with Henry, making her marriage to the king unlawful. But far more dangerous than her past was the revelation of Catherine's recent conduct. It emerged that she had held private meetings with Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber, during the royal progress, meetings arranged with the assistance of Lady Rochford, the widow of George Boleyn. Though the exact nature of these encounters remains uncertain, their secrecy alone was fatal. In the eyes of Henry and his council, it was treason for a queen even to consider an adulterous act. Under interrogation, Thomas Culpeper confessed that he intended to have a secret, intimate relationship with the Queen, an ambiguous phrase, but damning enough to seal their fates. Henry's anguish curdled into rage. The Queen he had so tenderly adored, the rose without a thorn, was now in his eyes the vilest traitor. No mercy would be shown. In early November 1541, Catherine was removed from Hampton Court and taken to Sion Abbey, a former nunnery repurposed as a place of confinement. She would never again know freedom. As winter deepened, the Queen's fate and that of those who had aided her hung in the balance. The machinery of Tudor justice, once set in motion, was merciless and inexorable. For Catherine Howard, once the cherished rose of Henry's court, the petals were already falling, and the executioner's axe lay waiting. The machinery of Tudor justice, once set in motion, was relentless. For Catherine Howard, Queen of England, there would be no escape, no redemption, and no second chance. The girl who had danced her way into the king's heart was now trapped, her fate sealed by betrayal, scandal, and fear. Confined within the cold, austere walls of Sion Abbey, Catherine Howard awaited the king's judgment. Isolated from her friends, stripped of her title, and tormented by uncertainty, she clung to a faint hope that Henry's love might still save her. But mercy was not among the Tudor king's familiar virtues. Henry VIII, once besotted, now felt only betrayal and humiliation. The revelation that Catherine, his rose without a thorn, had deceived him, both before and during their marriage, struck at the very heart of his pride. To pardon her would have been to admit his own foolishness before the entire realm. Such an admission was unthinkable. The Privy Council moved quickly. In December 1541, formal charges of treason were prepared against Catherine Howard. The evidence, letters, confessions, and the testimony of former associates was overwhelming. Though there was no absolute proof that adultery with Thomas Culpeper had occurred, the mere fact of secret meetings and illicit intentions was, under Tudor law, treason enough. Thomas Culpeper and Francis Derham faced swift, brutal justice. Both men were tried and found guilty of high treason. Derham, in particular, suffered the full horror of Tudor execution, hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn on December 10th, 1541. Culpeper, perhaps because of his position in the king's household, was granted a small measure of mercy. He was beheaded. Their deaths sent a chilling message throughout England. The crown would not tolerate betrayal, real or perceived, from those closest to it. As the new year turned, Catherine's own end loomed near. Stripped of royal privilege, she was returned to London under heavy guard. On the 21st of January, 1542, an Act of Attainder was introduced into Parliament, declaring her guilty of treason without the need for a formal trial. By the standards of Tudor justice, it was a swift and merciless process. Catherine Howard, once Queen of England, was now merely a condemned traitor awaiting her death. According to tradition, Catherine requested that a block be brought to her cell the night before her execution, so that she might practice laying her head upon it. Whether true or apocryphal, the image remains haunting. A young woman, barely 20 years of age, rehearsing her own death. On the morning of February 13th, 1542, Catherine Howard was led to Tower Green. Unlike common criminals, high-born prisoners were granted the dignity of a private execution within the Tower walls. Witnesses reported that she approached the scaffold with composure. In a clear voice, she declared herself guilty of her sins and prayed for the king's forgiveness. Then, laying her head upon the block she had so fearfully rehearsed upon, Catherine met her end with a courage that belied her tender years. Beside her, Lady Rochford, who had helped arrange her meetings with Culpeper, was also executed that same morning. Thus ended the brief and tragic life of Catherine Howard, a girl plucked from obscurity, raised to a throne, and destroyed by the unforgiving demands of Tudor honor. Catherine's story endures, a cautionary tale of innocence and ambition, love and betrayal, youth and mortality. In the brutal theatre of Henry VIII's court, she was not the first to fall, and she would not be the last. In the great chronicle of Henry VIII's reign, Catherine Howard's story remains one of its most poignant and tragic chapters. She was not a schemer, nor a master of courtly intrigue. She was at heart a child, thrust into a world of predators, ambition, and impossible expectations. Her downfall was not the product of malice, but of naivety, misjudgment, and the merciless standards imposed upon women at court. In the end, Catherine paid the ultimate price for mistakes made in youth in a society that demanded perfection from its queens, yet rarely from its kings. Catherine Howard's brief reign serves as a reminder that in the gilded world of Tudor England, crowns were often woven with thorns, and that behind the glittering facade of power, a single misstep could lead to ruin. She remains, forever, the queen who lived too brightly and fell too soon, a fleeting rose in a garden ruled by iron and blood. Thank you for joining us as we explored the life and tragic fall of Catherine Howard. If you found this journey through history compelling, please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel for more stories from the past, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear which parts of Catherine's story resonated most with you.